But have you ever wondered why paranormal investigators test for certain things? Why they use certain tools? And who decided what to test for, or how to debunk and prove a haunting is real or not? Well, today I will be walking you through 3 famous ghost stories that were debunked, but also played key roles in modern-day paranormal investigations. Each of these tales I will begin by telling you the eerie tale, the set of events that happened, and the stories left behind by those affected. And then I will present to you the truth of each tale, how they have been debunked, and the effect that each of these events had on society moving forward. Because yes, surprisingly, these 3 tales affected not only the paranormal investigation community, but also the everyday person, even to this day. Today I will be telling you the stories of the H family, San Antonio Railway, and Vic Tandy. Now let's get started. Tale number 1, the H family. The year was 1912. Mrs. H and her family moved into an old dilapidated home. It was 1912, and as such, this home was outfitted with gas lighting. Although some electricity had been getting installed, the lighting still hadn't been updated. The house actually hadn't been lived in for almost 10 years. Mrs. H reports, Mr. H and I had not been in the house more than a couple of days when we felt very depressed. The house was overpoweringly quiet. Soon after, however, the creepy sounds began to haunt the home. Unexplained noises that kept the family awake and scared them to their core. Mrs. H recalls, One morning I heard footsteps in the room over my head. I hurried up the stairs. To my surprise, the room was empty. I passed into the next, and then into all the rooms on that floor, and then to the floor above that to find I was the only person in that part of the house. Sometimes after I've gone to bed, the noises from the storeroom are tremendous, as if furniture was being piled up against the door, as if china was being moved about, and occasionally a long and fearful sigh or wail. Soon everyone in the house began hearing the noises as well. Mr. H, the children, and the servants. Additionally, everyone began feeling very ill. They were experiencing fatigue, along with pain and headaches, and finding themselves unable to eat. Life seemed to be listless in this home. Even the plants were withering and dying. Everyone was so on edge, and they were all feeling like they were being watched from all corners of the home. Mr. H would sit with his chair to the wall and facing the hallway so he could watch to see who was coming. The children refused to play upstairs in the playroom and begged to just stay in their bedroom instead. Mrs. H recalled, In spite of the rocking horse and toys being there, they begged to be allowed to play in the bedroom. Frustrated, Mrs. H decided to take the children on a vacation in December so they could have a bit of respite from the House of Horrors, while Mr. H stayed home. The vacation did wonders for Mrs. H and the children. They didn't feel sick any longer. They weren't feeling haunted and attacked by unseen things. They felt like their old selves again. Mr. H, however, wouldn't be so lucky. Being left alone in this creepy old house would put him even worse off. Mr. H would get no sleep as the noises at night would increase and get more violent. He would be awakened multiple times a night by the ringing of the bell at the door. He would go to the door, but find no one was there. He also kept hearing the telephone ringing, but no one was on the other line when he answered. And one night he heard the blaring sirens from a fire truck, but looked outside and could not find the truck anywhere on the street. Mrs. H and the children returned home around January, only for everything to start back up immediately. The children became quite sick with colds, which normally staying indoors would help, but they found themselves feeling better being outside, so Mrs. H let them stay outdoors. At night, when they came back in, their symptoms would just get worse. More noises invaded the sleep of the residents. The sounds of doors slamming, footsteps running down halls, pots and pans banging. Mrs. H even reported hearing footsteps climbing a staircase coming from the wall in her bedroom, which was nowhere near the stairs. The live-in servants were also reporting feeling as if someone was following them. At night, they would wake up to sounds of rattling china, footsteps, and furniture being dragged along the floors. And then the apparitions started. By the end of January 1913, the residents began seeing ghostly figures. Some were being awoken at night to see something sitting at the end of their beds as they lay there paralyzed with fear. Then people began seeing the figures walking around during the day. Mrs. H recalled, On one occasion in the middle of the morning, as I passed from the drawing room into the dining room, I was surprised to see at the further end of the drawing room coming towards me a strange woman, dark-haired and dressed in black. As I walked steadily on into the dining room to meet her, she disappeared. Mrs. H was convinced the home was haunted, so she and Mr. H decided to reach out to the previous family who lived there, and this just frightened them even more. The family told them that apparently the bizarre happenings had been going on for years, and the family had experienced the same things. Mrs. H recalled, with the exception that some of them had seen visions clad in purple and white crawling around on their beds. Going back still further, we learned that almost everyone had felt ill and had been under a doctor's care, although nothing very definite had been found the matter with them. At this point, the H family were now considering abandoning the house altogether as they couldn't stand it any longer. But happenstance would find a solution. Mrs. H's brother came to visit, and after hearing of their troubles, he told his sister he thought they were being poisoned. He had read an article a few years back about a family who had the same symptoms, and it turned out it was carbon monoxide leak in the furnace. Brother H begged them to call a doctor and get their furnace checked. Back then, the doctors would come and visit your home, so the next day, their doctor came out and took a look at them and the furnace, and it was reported. The doctor found the furnace in very bad condition, the combustion being imperfect. The fumes, instead of going up the chimney, were pouring gases of carbon monoxide into our rooms. He advised us not to let the children sleep in the house another night. If they did, he said, we might find in the morning that some of them would never wake again. The family left the home as the furnace was being repaired. All of their symptoms of the haunting were gone as soon as they left, and once they returned to a repaired furnace, they never reported seeing anything paranormal again. And this is the reason for their haunting. Johns Hopkins toxicologist Albert Donay commented on this story, and he said, no question about it, carbon monoxide poisoning can cause all manner of hallucinations, audio, visual, feeling strange things on their skin when there's nothing there. People often report that they hear noises in their ears, bells ringing and rushing sounds. This story actually was made popular as Mrs. H recounted it to her doctor, Dr. William Wilmer, and he had it published in the Journal of Pathology in 1922. Dr. Wilmer was an ophthalmologist who practiced in Washington, D.C., and was one of the most distinguished eye doctors of his time. He treated a number of famous people: William McKinley, Franklin Roosevelt, Charles Lindbergh, Joseph Pulitzer, and many others. This was the first time a ghost story made itself into a medical journal. But this story helped doctors going forward diagnose a possible poisoning when people were reporting paranormal happenings. So this haunting was debunked as carbon monoxide poisoning, but this has forever changed everything. This is now something that doctors consider if someone comes saying that they have a haunting. As well, paranormal investigators often bring with them carbon monoxide testers to see if there's any carbon monoxide leaking in a home. As the biggest thing with this is it can definitely come across as a haunting, but it is incredibly dangerous to go unchecked. This family was lucky that they survived at all. Tell me, what do you think of that story? Did you know about this apparent ghost story showing up in a medical journal? And did you know that this was the main reason that paranormal investigators started testing for carbon monoxide poisoning? Leave a comment below. Story number 2, San Antonio's Ghost Tracks. Trigger warning on this story. There is an accident taking the lives of children, as well there is a attempted unaliving. It was 1938, December 1st in San Antonio, Texas. It was a very foggy night. A storm had been berating the streets, and a bus full of children, driven by a nun, was trying to get the kids home safe from a field trip earlier that day. The nun had been struggling a bit with the drive, but she kept pushing on. If they stopped on the side of the street in this weather, they were sure to put the kids at more risk of getting hit by oncoming traffic or the storm itself causing their death or sickness. She just wanted to get the kids home safe and sound. As the nun drove along the road, suddenly the bus stalled out. She looked around and, of course, on top of the storm, the bus had failed them as well, and she realized it was stalled on train tracks. She was pretty familiar with the bus, and usually she could get it to start back up again just by trying the ignition. She looked both ways for a train, weighing the options. She looked back at the children, and half of them were asleep. So either she tries to get all the kids out of the bus on time, or she takes 2 minutes to try to restart the engine. She decided to keep trying the ignition. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a freight train appeared. She panicked, pushing the key over and over, trying to move quickly, but the train was moving at full speed. The train's headlamp had been burnt out, and that's why she hadn't seen the light coming. And the train had not seen the bus because of all the fog, and it had not applied any brakes whatsoever until the collision occurred. The train hit the bus and it just smashed in half, and it was complete destruction in the split second of a moment. The nun was flown out the windshield, and luckily she survived. The children, however, did not. Weeks later, the nun was so racked with guilt she felt she let down the children. She drove to the same tracks and parked her car on them, waiting to join the kids in the same demise. But just before a train showed up, her car was pushed by an unseen force across the tracks. When she got out of the car, she saw little handprints on her bumper. She then knew that the kids saved her, and she was forgiven. And then on, the kids have been saving any lost traveler who happens to stall out on these tracks. And thus the legend was born. And it is said to this day, if anyone parks their car on or near these railroad tracks at Shane Road, ghostly children will push the vehicle to safety, as they are determined to make sure that no one meets the same fate that they suffered. This legend has grown so much over the years. Tourists often come a lot, actually, to come sit on the railroad tracks and get pushed over. The issue, however, is this isn't true. The crash did happen, but it happened in Utah. I will put up the newspaper clipping on the screen here. The newspaper is from San Antonio, and this is where, I don't know, somewhere along the lines, people decided that these were the train tracks in San Antonio. So no one knows for sure how it got attached to these particular tracks, but I guess that has something to do with this newspaper clipping that's shared around. However, we'll get back to that in a second. First, to further explain the train tracks. The tracks where people experience this actually have an incline that moves the car across them, and that's why people will park their car on the train tracks, but you're supposed to leave your car in neutral. Well, the car in neutral can still move quite easily, and with the slight incline on these train tracks, the cars are just moving on their own with the incline. The handprints that people are saying that they see on their bumper, what they're doing is they're spreading talcum powder, baby powder, on their bumper after they make it across, and then they're seeing handprints. These are just handprints, like your own handprints from touching your own bumper, people touching it from when you were in the store, whatever it may be. It's just leftover handprints, and people are assuming that it's from the kids pushing them over, but that's not the case. A lot of people say, oh, well, I washed my car in soap and water, but soap and water actually themselves do not remove fingerprints. Alcohol and vinegar would, like acids would. However, you can use soap and water with friction to smudge the fingerprints off by wiping them. Wiping and rinsing and wiping again will help clean oils off, but it's usually not completely cleaned off. If you have ever tried cleaning a window with soap and water, it's still pretty foggy after. That's why you pull out the Windex. And a lot of people tend to just wash their car with soap and the water wands or whatever it may be. Even the touchless car washes just barely touch parts of the car. So your car is never completely free from all fingerprints. Now, back to the newspaper. Remember I told you that each of these stories did affect the future going forward. Well, this particular crash that did happen in Utah, it was so intense and people were so affected by it that they decided like something needs to be put into place to help protect things like buses of children across train tracks. This crash is the reason that all buses now stop at railroad tracks. They stop and they open their door and they listen to hear for trains coming. This crash is also the reason that they started implementing either lights and a bar at train tracks, or the trains are now honking their horn at every track that don't have the lights available to them, or sometimes they do both. So this crash actually affected all of this future. It affected how buses react across train tracks, and it affected how trains react against tracks that are coming to a crossing that might have like a vehicle on it. So this story is actually a very impactful, unfortunate accident, but it did probably help save future lives. But this is why it was in the San Antonio paper. It was in many papers at that time because it was a story that really got to everyone and it made the rounds, and it affected, even up in Canada, we do the thing where we stop at the buses at the train tracks. Like all of North America heard about this story. It was very sad and people were really upset by it, so it definitely made its rounds. But let me know what you think of this story. Leave a comment below. If you've been to the tracks, let me know your experiences there as well. Story number 3. Vic Tandy. It was the 1980s. A researcher, Vic Tandy, was working away in his lab at a medical manufacturing company. Word was that this lab was haunted. Tandy laughed off those rumors. He assumed it was because of all the noises from the different machines operating in the building, kind of throwing people off. He really enjoyed this job and he was happy working away in a lab. But one day, he just started feeling really off. He was feeling very drained. He began to feel sick all the time. He was sweating, but he was shivering as cold as if he had some sort of fever, but he didn't have a fever. Then he found that he was falling ill with depression. He just kind of pushed through, trying to get by in his life, as many of us do. But then something happened. he began to feel as if something was in the lab with him. He kept having this feeling of being watched, and it was constantly happening now. And then he saw an apparition. He was working away at his desk when he saw a gray apparition of a person start to form beside him. He spun around to confront the thing, but then it vanished. He was so frightened, he immediately went home, but he did show back up to work the next day and kept on plowing through like he usually does. A few days after seeing the apparition, something very interesting happened. Tandy was an avid fencer, and he had his sword with him at work. He was polishing it as he prepared to go fencing in his spare time later. He had the sword in clamps, and as he polished it, he noticed it was vibrating. Even though it was held steady by clamps at his workstation, it was still humming and moving. From this, he thought he should start testing his lab for infrasound because there might be some trapped in there. This could have ramifications on the research going on. It could skew things or damage things, so he decided to get to the bottom of it. He began running tests around the lab and soon found that infrasound was trapped inside. He found a standing sound wave causing the vibrations across the whole lab. It was bouncing between the walls, and it reached a peak of intensity at his desk, the same desk he kept seeing the apparition at. It turns out the 19 hertz sound had been coming from a newly installed extractor fan. When the fan was turned off, the sound wave disappeared. Tandy, of course, being a scientist, figured this must be the reason why he saw the apparitions and why he had been feeling a presence around him. So he decided to test it properly by recreating the incident. With the help of his colleague, Dr. Tony Lawrence, he was able to recreate the experiences of a haunting. They found that the wave within this 19 hertz region was causing discomfort, dizziness, blurred vision because it vibrated your eyeballs, also hyperventilation and fear, and also can lead to panic attacks. Their research led them to conclude that infrasound at or around a frequency of 19 hertz has a range of physiological effects, including the feelings of fear and even shivering. Though this had been known already for years, Tandy and Lawrence were the first to actually link it to ghost sightings. They published their findings in the Journal for Psychical Research. Tandy went on to appear in TV shows and work on big hauntings as a debunker. One such famous haunting is the cellar of the Coventry's Tourist Center, and another is Warwick Castle. In both locations, he found the infrasound levels that induced the feelings of hallucinations as the cause for the hauntings there. Ever since then, professional paranormal investigators have tested infrasound at haunted locations as part of the standard debunking steps. An interesting side note, I found this little thing and I just wanted to add it in the video and see what you guys think. A parallel. Researchers have recorded that prior to a tiger's attack, the roar actually contains frequencies of about 18 hertz. They think that the roar actually disorients and paralyzes the intended victim, and people are questioning maybe this is the sound of fear itself. This hertz area range, 18 to 19, might be fear. So, this particular story, it did affect things because, yes, they kind of knew that these sounds sort of affected people, but they never linked it to paranormal incidents and ghostly hauntings. So this is something now that paranormal investigators do look for in a haunting. I haven't seen as many paranormal investigators actually test for this nowadays, but the ones who are very serious in trying to debunk as much as they can do test for this sort of thing. But let me know, what do you think about this sound wave? What do you think about these findings? Leave a comment below. So those are just 3 stories of many that have affected paranormal investigations, debunking, along with other things. Even look at the San Antonio train tracks. Well, it was the Utah bus accident, and it actually changed the way that we function at train tracks going forward, which is very interesting. But this is where debunkers get their initial information from. As professional paranormal investigators, once you take this sort of stuff seriously, these are the things that they pass down. These are the things that they test for. And this is where these tests come from. They don't just come out of nowhere. There is scientific backing to some of these things. But let me know, what do you think about these stories? What do you think about the findings of these researchers? And what do you think about urban legends getting so out of control that they move from one state to another and aren't even really true anymore? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you've enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow out this channel some more. I want to actually provide more stories and more shows for you guys, and I need to grow out the channel to actually do what I envision I want to do with this channel. And if you enjoyed these particular stories, definitely check out my video from last week where I discuss a few ghostly stories from New Orleans that have been debunked. I will link it up here for you too. That's it for me though. Have a good night.